The night stretched wide like an endless sheet of black velvet, stitched with faint silver stars. A December wind carried whispers of frost across the interstate, brushing against the steel skin of a long-haul truck. Its headlights cut two lonely tunnels through the dark, glowing like beacons searching for something they'd never quite find. Inside that rumbling beast of chrome and iron sat John Miller, a man who had spent more Christmases behind the wheel than by a fireplace. The dashboard lights painted his face in shades of green and/or orange, highlighting the quiet lines carved deep by years of miles, memories, and missing home. The CB radio crackled now and then, offering half-hearted chatter from other drivers scattered across the frozen highways. But John wasn't listening tonight. His mind wandered elsewhere, toward a little house 3 states away, where the smell of pine and cinnamon candles would be filling the rooms he couldn't be in. His truck was his companion, his burden, and his shelter. A red Kenworth W900, polished once with pride, but now dulled by road salt and snow, hummed beneath him like a living creature. Every gear shift, every vibration, every sigh of the engine was as familiar as his own heartbeat. Out here, the truck wasn't just metal and wheels. It was memory. Christmas Eve, John whispered to himself, his breath fogging against the cool cab window. The words tasted heavy. He thought about his daughter, Emily, 7 years old, probably bouncing around a decorated tree with ribbons tangled in her hair. He could almost hear her laughter echoing through the static silence of his cab, but imagination was a cruel gift. It showed him everything his eyes could not. The miles rolled on like a ribbon unwinding. Snow began to fall in slow, gentle flakes, catching the glow of his headlights like tiny fragments of glass. The road seemed softer, quieter, as if even the highway knew it was Christmas. The world had slowed, but John could not. A delivery waited 2 states over, a promise to a company that never cared what day it was. Freight doesn't pause for holidays. His hands gripped the wheel tighter. They weren't just steering rubber and steel, they were holding onto the show, weight of sacrifice. For every gift under Emily's tree, there was a mile John had driven. For every warm meal his wife Sarah served tonight, there was a night he had spent with cold coffee and gas station sandwiches. Truckers live in the spaces between other people's comfort. They carry the packages, the groceries, the toys, the decorations, everything. That makes Christmas bright. And yet, more often than not, they spend the holiday chasing white lines on black asphalt. The radio hummed with a distant holiday song, fuzzy, half lost in static. "I'll be home for Christmas." John turned the dial quickly. Too much truth lived in that tune. Instead, he let the hum of the diesel fill the silence. It was a sound that had rocked him to sleep, more times than any lullaby. A sign flashed by on the right. Rest area. 10 miles. He debated pulling in, parking under the fluorescent glow, maybe grabbing a cup of lukewarm coffee from a vending machine. But the thought of sitting still, alone with his thoughts, was worse than the loneliness of driving. At least while moving, he could pretend he was going somewhere. Toward something. Outside, the snowfall thickened. The road glistened like a silver ribbon laid under the moonlight. Each flake that touched the windshield melted instantly, leaving streaks that blurred the world into soft watercolors. And in that blur, John saw his past. He remembered his first Christmas as a driver, 20 years ago. A rookie on the road, terrified of black ice and blizzards, he had pulled into a truck stop where a group of drivers shared pie and stories. He was young, hopeful, telling himself it was just one Christmas away from home. There would be many, more to come. But 20 Christmases later, here he was, still on the road, still chasing freight, still missing the things that mattered most. His daughter's stocking would be hanging by the fireplace tonight. He had mailed her a small gift last week. Nothing fancy, just a silver locket with a picture of the three of them inside. Sarah had promised she'd make sure Emily opened it on Christmas morning. John smiled faintly at the thought, but the smile quickly faded, because he knew the gift wasn't enough. Presents can never be replaced by presents. The truck climbed a long, slow hill. The engine groaned, straining against the weight. Beyond the rise, the horizon stretched wide, dark clouds gathering like a curtain waiting to fall. Somewhere out there, his journey twisted into something unexpected, something this Christmas night had in store. But for now, it was just him, a truck, a lonely road, and a Christmas Eve painted in headlights and snow. The loneliness pressed harder against his chest, and John whispered into the dark cab, "Merry Christmas, kiddo. Daddy's still out here." And the road answered back with silence. The miles ticked by like beads on a rosary, each one a silent prayer whispered to the night. Out here, the highway was both a punishment and a sanctuary. It took from John what mattered most, time with his family, but it also gave him a strange kind of peace. The hum of the tires, the rhythm of the white lines flashing beneath, the endless horizon. It was a lullaby for the restless. But tonight, peace felt distant. Tonight, the road felt heavier than usual. John's thoughts drifted back to Sarah, his wife. She had always been the anchor of their little family. A schoolteacher with gentle patience, she held their world together while John was gone for weeks at a time. She never complained, though he knew the weight she carried. The late-night schoolwork grading, the bedtime stories she read alone, the bills she paid, the quiet tears she probably cried when she thought no one was watching. He remembered the first Christmas they had spent together before Emily was born. They couldn't afford much back then. John was just starting his career, running short routes, and Sarah was teaching part-time. They had decorated a tiny tree in their small apartment, with popcorn strings and handmade paper stars. The memory warmed him, though it also burned with longing. Now their tree stood 3 states away, glowing without him. The snow outside thickened, wrapping the truck in a swirling white cocoon. The windshield wipers swayed back and forth like a pendulum marking time. And with every sweep, John thought about the sacrifices that came with this life. He carried America on his back, mile after mile. The groceries in stores, the toys under trees, the fuel that kept cities alive. He had hauled it all, but in carrying the weight of the nation, he had missed carrying his daughter on his shoulders. He had traded birthdays for breakdowns, anniversaries for asphalt, bedtime kisses for midnight, rest stops. The road takes, and it takes silently. But it also gives. Strange lessons carved into a driver's soul. John had learned that loneliness can be a teacher. It teaches you to value the smallest things. A phone call, a letter, a moment of laughter when the miles feel endless. It teaches you patience, because every road eventually ends. And it teaches you resilience, because no storm lasts forever. He thought about Emily again, the way she'd begged him last week, her little voice cracking through the phone line. "Daddy, will you be home for Christmas this year?" He had paused. His throat had tightened. And then he had given the answer he hated most. "Not this time, sweetheart. Daddy's got to keep driving." There had been silence on the other end. Then a soft, brave, "Okay." But John knew better. He knew that behind that "okay" was disappointment. Children don't measure love in money, or gifts, or miles. They measure it in moments. Moments he couldn't give. A green highway sign flashed through the snowfall. Nashville, 120 miles. He still had hours to go before his stop. Hours of thinking. Of replaying every missed Christmas in his head. The truck's heater rattled, filling the cab with warm, recycled air. He leaned back in his seat, eyes heavy, but heart wide awake. He thought of Christmases past when he was a boy. His father wasn't a trucker. He had worked at a factory in Ohio. But even with his long hours and tired hands, he had always been home on Christmas morning. John had woken to the smell of his mother's cinnamon rolls and the sound of wrapping paper tearing like thunder. He remembered racing his brother to the tree, the laughter echoing through the house, the warmth of being together. Back then, Christmas was magic. Back then, it was about presents, not presents. And somewhere along the road, John felt like he had lost that. The snowstorm thickened, forcing him to slow. His headlights carved tunnels through the white curtain, illuminating flakes that seemed to dance like tiny spirits. The world outside disappeared. No trees, no sky, no horizon. Just him and the road, sealed inside a snow globe of loneliness. He gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles white. The metaphor wasn't lost on him. Life itself was a highway in the storm. You couldn't see too far ahead, but you had to keep moving anyway. His CB radio crackled to life suddenly, breaking the silence. Breaker 19. Anybody else out? In this mess tonight? A tired voice asked. John reached for the mic, hesitated, then pressed the button. Yeah, driver. Still rolling. Christmas Eve and all. The other man chuckled, though it sounded hollow. Figures. Freight don't. Wait, where you headed? Southbound, Nashville. You? Memphis, the man replied. Ain't it something? All these lights on the road, but none of us headed home. Static filled the silence that followed, and John let go of the mic. The stranger's words hit too close, because it was true. Thousands of truckers tonight were doing exactly what he was doing, carrying someone else's Christmas while losing their own. The thought ached, but it also brought a strange comfort. Maybe he wasn't as alone as he felt. The road stretched on, each mile a thread woven into the fabric of his story. He wasn't just a truck driver, he was a provider, a dreamer, a man chasing the horizon for the sake of those he loved. And yet, tonight on Christmas Eve, he was also just a lonely father whispering prayers into the dark. As the snow swirled thicker, John whispered one more, his voice breaking just a little. God, just keep her smiling tomorrow. That's all I want. And then, with that, he pressed the pedal forward, chasing not just the miles, but the memory of home waiting on the other side of the storm. The snowfall turned heavier, swallowing the road in a blinding white veil. John leaned forward, squinting into the storm. His wipers worked overtime, squeaking across the glass in a frantic rhythm. But the snow fell faster than they could clear. The highway, once alive with the hum of distant headlights, grew empty. One by one, taillights vanished into the blizzard until it was just him, his truck, and the storm. The silence pressed against the cab, broken only by the steady growl of the diesel engine and the occasional crackle of the CB radio. John's phone buzzed on the dashboard. The name Sarah lit up the screen. His heart jumped. For a moment, he thought about pulling over to answer. But the shoulder was buried in snow, the road slick with ice, and the wind pushed at his trailer like invisible hands trying to tip him over. He couldn't risk stopping here. The phone buzzed, again, then went quiet. And in that silence, the weight of disappointment settled heavy on his chest. He imagined Sarah sitting by the tree, her face tired, her voice soft as she tried to explain to Emily why Daddy couldn't talk right now. He imagined his daughter's little shoulders drooping, her smile fading as she clutched the phone that never answered. The guilt hit harder than the storm. He tightened his grip on the wheel, whispering into the empty cab. I'm sorry, baby girl. I'll call soon, I promise. But promises, he knew, were like snowflakes, beautiful when they fell, fragile when they landed. The truck rattled as a gust of wind slammed into it. John steadied the wheel, jaw clenched, every nerve awake. The storm wasn't just weather, it was a test. The kind of test every trucker fears on nights like this. Up ahead, a faint glow pierced through the snow. He eased closer until the shape revealed itself. A small roadside diner, its neon sign flickering red against the whiteout. The letters read, "Midnight's Diner, open 24 hours." John hesitated. He could push forward and risk the storm, or he could pull in and lose time. But something deep in his gut told him to stop. With a careful turn, he guided his rig into the parking lot. The tires crunched through snow as he parked under the weak glow of a street lamp. He killed the engine, the sudden silence almost deafening. Inside, the diner, warmth, spilled out in the glow of yellow lights and the faint sound of an old jukebox humming carols. A handful of strangers sat scattered in booths, travelers, truckers, souls caught by the storm. John slid into a booth near the window, ordered a black coffee and sat in silence. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes but a kind smile, placed the steaming mug in front of him. "Rough night out there?" she asked. "Yeah," John replied, his voice low. "Christmas Eve on the road." She nodded, as if she'd heard the same story 100 times. "Well, you're not the only one. Storm's got half the highway shut down. Might be here a while." John wrapped his hands around the mug, letting the heat seep into his cold fingers. He glanced around the diner. At one booth, 2 truckers shared pie and laughed at a story that probably wasn't funny but mattered because it cut the silence. At another, a young couple sat close, whispering over hot chocolate, their eyes tired but hopeful. Near the jukebox, an old man in a worn coat tapped his foot slowly to the tune of Silent Night. For a moment, John felt like he wasn't alone. This little diner was more than a stop. It was a shelter for all the lost and lonely souls caught in the storm. His phone buzzed again. He grabbed it quickly, hope lighting his face. But it wasn't Sarah. It was a text from Emily. "Merry Christmas. Daddy! I miss you. Did you get my letter?" John's throat tightened. He remembered the envelope she had handed Sarah last week, asking her to mail it. He hadn't opened it yet. It was still tucked safely in his glove box. His hands trembled as he typed back, "Merry Christmas, sweetheart. I miss you too. Daddy will read your letter tonight." He hit send, staring at the screen until her reply came. "Okay. Don't forget, I love you." The words struck deeper than the cold ever could. Outside, the storm howled louder, rattling the diner's windows. The waitress turned up the radio, and Bing Crosby's voice filled the room. "I'll be home for Christmas." John closed his eyes. The song was too much, too honest. It carved through his chest, reminding him of everything he wasn't, everything he couldn't be tonight. And yet, it also reminded him of why he kept driving. Because home wasn't just a place you reached. It was a promise you carried, mile after mile, no matter how lonely the road. As the storm raged on, John sat with his coffee, his heart torn between guilt and love, loneliness and duty. And somewhere deep inside, he knew this night wasn't over. Something waited out there on the road, a test, a moment, a turning point. Christmas Eve still had more to give. John lingered in the diner longer than he meant to. The warmth of the coffee, the hum of carols, the soft chatter of strangers, it wrapped him in a fragile comfort. But the clock on the wall ticked mercilessly, each second reminding him of the miles still waiting. The waitress refilled his cup, her smile faint but kind. "Careful out there," she said softly, as though she could see the weight in his eyes. He nodded, slid a few bills under the mug, and pulled on his heavy coat. Stepping outside, the cold slapped him instantly. The storm had grown meaner, the wind screaming across the parking lot, snow piling against the tires of his truck. It looked less like weather now and more like a living thing, wild, untamed, determined to test every soul brave enough to fight. John climbed into his cab, the door slamming shut against the roar. He sat still for a moment, staring at the glove box, Emily's letter. With trembling hands, he opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper decorated with little crayon stars and hearts. The handwriting was crooked, the spelling imperfect, but to John, it was the most beautiful thing in the world. Dear Daddy, I miss you. Mommy says you're working hard. I know you drive the big truck so other kids can have Christmas. But I just want you to come home. I will wait for you. I love you so much. Merry Christmas. Love, Emily. John's eyes blurred. The storm outside vanished into silence as he read the words again, then again, each one piercing deeper than any snow or wind could. His little girl understood more than he thought. She knew why he was gone. She forgave him. And yet, her words carried the ache of a child's simple wish, that her daddy would be there, not just in letters, but in person. He folded the paper gently, pressed it against his chest, and whispered, I'm coming home, baby. One day, I'll be there for Christmas. I promise. The engine roared to life as he turned the key. He eased back onto the highway, the truck's headlights pushing into the storm. The snow came harder, swirling in wild patterns, but his grip on the wheel felt steadier now. Miles passed slowly, the world outside erased into a wall of white. His CB radio hissed alive again. Breaker 19. Anybody stuck near mile marker 214? Got a car off the road here. John's hand shot to the mic. This is Red Kenworth, southbound. I'm not far. You need help? Static. Then a voice. Yeah. Family stranded. Slid right into a ditch. Can't get out. John's chest tightened. He glanced at the dashboard clock. Every delay meant less chance of making delivery on time. But then he thought of Emily's letter. He thought of the words. I know you drive the big truck so other kids can have Christmas. This was the test. Not the storm, not the miles, but the choice. Hang tight, John said firmly. I'm on my way. He slowed carefully, hazard, lights flashing, eyes scanning the snow-blind road. And then he saw it. A small minivan tilted off the shoulder, half buried in drifts. The headlights flickered weakly, a beacon of desperation. John pulled his rig to the side as safely as he could, crunching through snow as he climbed down. The wind cut through his coat, biting at his skin, but adrenaline kept him moving. Inside, the van, a young couple huddled with two small children wrapped in blankets. Fear was etched across their faces, but relief lit their eyes when they saw him. You folks all right? John shouted over the wind. The father opened the door, his voice shaking. We've been stuck an hour. Heater's dying. Kids are freezing. John wasted no time. Come on, let's get you in the diner down the road. My rig's warm. We'll get you there. He helped them climb into his cab, guiding the children gently, wrapping one of his own blankets around the smallest. Their little faces reminded him of Emily. Every shiver, every wide-eyed glance, it felt like his daughter was right there, looking at him through their eyes. Back at the diner, the waitress ushered them in with blankets and hot chocolate, her face glowing with gratitude. The family thanked John again and again, but he only shook his head. Just doing what any driver would, he said softly. But inside, something shifted. For the first time all night, the loneliness eased. The road had taken much from him, yes. But tonight, it had also given him this. A chance to be the kind of father his daughter believed him to be, even from miles away. As he stepped back into the storm, climbing into his truck once more, the road didn't feel quite so empty. The snow was still fierce, the miles still long, but his heart carried warmth now, a flicker of Christmas light glowing steady in the dark. And somewhere deep inside, he knew. This night would not break him. This night would remind him who he was. Not just a trucker, not just a man on the road, but a father, a husband, a soul carrying love down a highway of snow. The sun was already stretching across the horizon by the time John pulled his 18-wheeler into the gravel driveway of his modest home. The journey had been long, longer than most, but as the truck's engine sighed into silence, he realized the true weight of miles wasn't measured in asphalt or fuel, but in the distance between the man he had been when he left and the man he was now. The front door creaked open, and before he even had the chance to step down, a small figure burst into view. His son, bare feet slapping against the porch wood, came running, his laughter slicing through the heavy silence of the morning. "Daddy!" the boy shouted, leaping into his arms as John knelt to catch him. For a long moment, John held him tight, burying his face into the messy curls that smelled faintly of soap and grass. Every sleepless night on the road, every lonely mile, every whisper of doubt, suddenly it all felt worth it. From behind the boy, his wife stepped onto the porch, arms folded softly across her chest, a quiet smile spread across her face. There was no anger in her eyes for the days and nights he had been gone, only relief and warmth that he was finally home. She didn't need to say anything. Her silence was its own welcome. That evening after dinner, John sat with his son in the backyard. The boy's small hands were playing with a toy truck, pushing it across the dirt, mimicking the deep growl of engines as if he too had been born with diesel in his blood. "Daddy?" the boy asked suddenly, looking up with wide, curious eyes. "Why do you drive so far? Why do you go away so long?" The question landed heavy in John's chest. He glanced toward the house, where the warm glow of the kitchen window framed his wife's silhouette as she washed the dishes. Then he looked back at his son. "Because sometimes, son," he said slowly, choosing each word with care, "a man drives far not just to make a living, but to bring something back home. Every mile I drive, every long night I fight through. It's not just about the road, it's about you. It's about giving you a future better than mine. So you don't have to fight the same storms I did." The boy tilted his head, trying to absorb the weight of the words. "But doesn't it get lonely?" John smiled softly, ruffling his son's hair. "It does, but then I think of you, and suddenly I'm not alone anymore." The truth is, the road had always been John's companion, but now he understood it differently. The road wasn't just about escape or burden, it was about sacrifice, and sacrifice, when done for love, had meaning. As night settled, he carried his son to bed. The boy's eyelids drooped heavily, and just before drifting off, he whispered, "Daddy, when I grow up I'll drive too, but maybe not so far." John kissed his forehead gently, the corners of his mouth curving with pride and a touch of sadness. "Maybe you won't have to, son. Maybe you'll build roads instead of driving them. Maybe you'll take us places I could never reach. That's the whole point of all this." His wife joined him later, resting her head against his shoulder as they sat quietly on the porch swing. For the first time in months, John wasn't thinking about the next delivery, the next storm, or the next endless highway. He was thinking about now, this small piece of peace, this family he came back to, this life he fought for mile after mile. The miles John drove were not just lines drawn across a map, they were lessons. He learned that distance does not weaken love, it strengthens it. He learned that sacrifice, when rooted in family, creates a legacy stronger than steel and asphalt. But most of all, he realized that the greatest journey isn't the one that takes you across the country. It's the one that takes you back home, back to the people who remind you why you set out in the first place. And for his son, the moral was even clearer. True strength isn't found in how far you can go alone. but in how deeply you can love and return. And maybe that's the story we all need to hear. Because no matter who we are, truckers, dreamers, wanderers, we're all traveling some kind of road. Some nights it feels endless. Some days it feels lonely. But if you keep driving, if you keep holding on to the thought of the ones waiting for you at the end, you'll find your way home. So if this story touched you, if you saw a piece of yourself in John, his son, or his wife, then don't just let it fade into the background. Hit that like button to let us know you want more stories like this. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss the next journey. And if you know someone out there who feels lost on their own road, share this with them. Because sometimes the right story is all it takes to remind us why we keep moving forward. The road is long. The nights are dark. But no one drives forever alone. This was John's story. Now tell me, what's yours?